What are some other indicators that you might see with somebody's eyes?
Bloodshot.
Bloodshot, okay. Watery. Anybody else?
Dilation.
Dilation.
of the pupil. How about even the eyelids?
Cool, sleeping, nodding.
Right.
Okay. Sensitive to light. Okay. Dilated. How
Well,
about
if your eyes were sensitive to light, what might you do?
Sunglasses.
Exactly. Indoors. It's not that bright out, you know.
Sure.
Right?
And one of the things too with an injury, what's one of the very first things they do with head injuries? Say football, guys out in the field, knocked down, or
See them
basketball.
on the field. What are they doing?
Checking the eyes.
Follow the light.
Right.
They're checking for tracking and a couple other things.
Pupillary response.
Yeah, pupillary response. Okay. There's another thing in what law enforcement is looking for. It's known as horizontal gaze nystagmus, and it's the involuntary jerking of the eyeball. Okay. And are you going to be doing this in the workplace for somebody? Absolutely not. But there's very, very subtle ways that you can check to see if this nystagmus is there. And here's what nystagmus is.
It's good looking eyes there, I would say. Okay.
You see that bouncing? Okay. And the rule of thumb is if you think you see it, it's not there.
See the jerky movement of the eyes as they move? That's a young Tom Page, by the way.
There's also vertical nystagmus. You see it going up and bouncing down like somebody's bouncing a basketball? Okay. There's certain categories. Everyone has got it naturally, but for the most part you don't see it. There's certain categories of drug that enhance it. And that's depressants, inhalants, and PCP. And alcohol falls into the depressive category, and that's why one of the reasons law enforcement is doing this. Number one, they're making sure that it's not an illness or an injury. Let's rule out the fact that it's illness or injury, then let's consider something else.
3 different types of drugs, as Tom mentioned, might induce that in the eyes. The dip drugs, depressants, of which alcohol is one, inhalants such as glues and solvents. P is for PCP, the dip drugs. If it's not a dip drug, it doesn't produce this nystagmus. And it can be something very visible. You saw it through the magic of TV, but you can actually see it in people.
And there's ways to do it. If I could have a volunteer, Jeff?
Oh, well, thank you for volunteering, Jeff.
Come up here. There's very subtle ways you can do this. There's a lot of subtle things you can do in the workplace, okay? And that's when you suspect that somebody, and you want to bring them in and you talk to them. But the first thing, one of the first things you do is you go to somebody else, and like I would go to Tommy. Tommy, you remember that drug class we went to?
Yes.
Yeah, the best class we ever attended.
The best, two
Yes.
good-looking young men up there? Yep.
Exactly.
Okay.
Anyways, I noticed something with Jeff. Would you come along with me and let me know what you think? And let it go at that. I'm not planting a seed. I'm not giving him any indicators to look at. Come with me and let me know what you think. And obviously, having attended the class, he's going to think, okay, something's going on. But I'm not saying a word to him about what it is. And we can approach Jeff. Come on, I want to talk to you, okay? So I'm standing here talking with Jeff, and how long you've been on that particular job you got, Jeff?
Oh, about 5-6 months.
About 5-6 months, and you left? Yeah. Okay.
November. Yeah.
Yeah. You started with this company back when?
Oh, it was November.
It was November. Okay, so that's been about how many months now?
A little bit more, maybe 9 months.
Okay. What is he doing as we're talking?
It's a
Is
subtle
he
way of
moving his
checking.
head back and forth?
No. Just moving his
In
eyes.
fact, do you see where his eyes are right now? That was basically where my eyes were off to the side on the video right there. Is that in normal, everyday conversation, we move not just our heads, but we move our eyes. You can actually see it in somebody that might have it very, very visibly by just doing it like that. In fact, that's a really good rule. If you have a suspected alcohol, drug impaired employee, you got to have somebody with you. For lots of different reasons. I mean, strategic reasons, safety reasons. Just you need another set of eyes and another brain to see.
Subtle things to do. Come on, let's go outside, Jeff. I want to.
But he did have a little bit of nystagmus. I don't know if, no, he did not have any nystagmus. So
Doing this, and you see a law enforcement do this all the time. You see doctors and nurses do checking muscle rigidity. Okay, because some muscles, make you real rigid. PCP is one, for example. Thank you, Jeff. There's subtle ways of checking for vertical nystagmus, okay? Have them sitting down and come up and talk to them, okay? If you notice, look how our eyes are going up, okay? Eyes are going up, and you would see the vertical, okay?
just something to be aware of, that certain substances cause it. It is a bad thing. It does impair ability to see. It does impair driving. It's not a normal way. It's a dysfunction of the movements of the eyes.
I mentioned there's the 3 clues that law enforcement looks for, and obviously you're not going to do that. The one you see it the best in is the maximum deviation. And I mentioned to Jeff, Jeff or Al, one of the guys had a woman arrested for DWI, would not do any field sobriety test. She would stand there and just stare at him like this, Al Samard. And Al just started walking back and forth. And she wouldn't turn her head, but she followed with the eyes.
So, officer, I'm not going to follow that thing. Every time I do, I go to jail.
As he did it, she watched with the eyes. And he checked for a lack of smooth pursuit. And then he got over there, stood in the corner, and just stood there looking at her, and she'd look at him out of the corner. He did all 3 clues. And then he said, okay, I'm charging you with DWI. Will you take a breath test? She said, yeah. She wouldn't have to do a field sobriety test, but she took the breath test.
Easy way to think of it is that as your alcohol level goes up in your body, you remember how we talked about those 3 things, that your vital signs first, coordination second, thinking later, and it's the first things to go. If you think of how an infant in a crib responds to people around him or her, is that before they learn to deviate their eyes, they move their whole head. And when they're teenagers, they learn to look out of the back of their head and look behind. They learn to deviate their eyes. When alcohol level goes up, they start regressing. Their eyes regress. And if you've gone to an event, a party, or whatever, and people have been drinking before you got there, and somebody sees, hey, welcome, come on in, they get right in your face. I mean, it's like they don't deviate their eyes, they deviate their face and get right in your face. It's a physiological, you lose the ability. In fact, when their alcohol level gets really, really high, they're not able to even hardly do the test because don't move your head. I mean, they forget, for one thing, and they just got to move their head. They're not able to see.
People who enable usually do so because they are trying to help the drug user. True. It's absolutely true. They think they're helping, when in fact they're not.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk a little bit about what we mean by that. We need to define the term first. Is that it's really doing something, or probably more frequently not doing something, that detracts from or minimizes the consequences of behavior. And another real word for it is, in fact, covering. And as Tom said in that question, we cover for those we care about, those that we like, those that we don't want to get into trouble. And by covering for them, what basically happens? Well, it sort of leads to denial, but they're allowed to do what? Continue. And I've seen it in the workplace. You cover for those you care about. You take action. I never liked this guy to begin with. I'm going to take action. We're going to call this person on in. Who gets help? The one you don't like about. Who continues is the one that you care about. So it really has the exact opposite effects that you would like.
And a problem is a problem that's not acknowledged. It does not have to be dealt with. So if supervisors don't want to acknowledge there's a problem, it doesn't have to be dealt with.
And working with employees is not just supervisors. When you talk about enabling behavior, you know who they point the finger at? Their supervisors. They say, it's do our supervisors get this class? Because we tell them, we slip notes on them, we know what the problem is, they got to know, but they don't do anything about it. Is that by not doing, it's Newton's first law of motion, that a body in motion does what? Until what? Something takes it off.
Take the word motion out, put behavior in. People will continue in behavior until there's some type of consequence. Resistance is a reluctance to take specific appropriate action once a substance abuser has been recognized.
Okay. Related concept, denial and resistance. Okay.
Drug trends and prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs. Okay. American Medical Association, as of January 2002, half of the U.S. adults take at least one prescription drug weekly. 2.98, that should be billion. Is that correct, Tom?
Yes, correct.
2.98 billion prescriptions filled in 2000, 60% increase. A quarter of the population takes 5 or more prescription drugs or herbal products, 50% for the elderly. And what happens with prescription drugs? We talk about drugs and driving while ability impaired by drugs. You can be charged with driving while ability impaired by drugs even though you have the prescription for it. A drug is a drug is a drug. And where people get into trouble, they take non-therapeutic doses. Just take one every 4 hours, I'll feel good. If I take 2, I'll feel gooder quicker. That type of mentality.
Do people ever share prescription drugs? Yeah, take a Valium. Here, I got Valium. Why don't you take one of mine?
I'm not feeling good. Well, my doctor gave me these when I didn't feel good. Try one of these. It's estimated that 75, 90%. 90% of the people taking a prescription drug do not have the prescription for it. How does that happen? Geez, I hurt my back playing basketball. Geez, when I hurt my back, my doctor gave me these, Tylenol with codeine. Here, take one. It'll help you.
Right. So let's talk a little briefly about what are the more likely ones that are going to be abused of the prescription type. And there's really just three categories. Narcotic pain relievers, these are the ones that really are either based on opium or are synthetic. OxyContin's certainly been in the news a lot, particularly in New England. Synthetic form, it basically does the same effects of heroin. Great pain relievers if you need it. Sold really in a controlled release formula. Vicodin, Vicks as they're sometimes called, and related drugs. Then we have the anti-anxiety, anxiolytics, reduce anxiety. I mentioned Valium, Xanax, not only a drug but a palindrome.
Let me interrupt you 1 minute, Tommy.
Yes.
What's the new one coming? And watch CBS.
Well, no, this is the Tom Page prediction. You've heard it here first. A drug called modafinil. I think I spelled it right. Provigil, brand name. Good drug under right circumstances, but to me it has a lot of potential for abuse. And I did see something, that there's going to be something on the news tonight about it. It is a stimulant drug that, as many stimulant drugs, this only has good effects. You know, people won't abuse it. It just keeps them up awake for weeks at a time, which is good in the military, and you're fighting you're in the jet fighter that you got to get somewhere and get back. But I don't know, because you don't feel tired doesn't mean what? Therefore, you don't need sleep. If you take a pill that takes away your hunger, doesn't mean what? I never need to eat again. I just take the pills. It doesn't mean that. So it's sort of my prediction. It meets a lot of my criteria for being an abused drug. Legal liability issues, we'd like you to take action because what? It's a good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It helps people. But there are some consequences for not taking action. So there's the carrot and there's the stick. And part of it's legal liability, dealing with what's called negligent retention. And the courts have said, and it's an underlying philosophy of our system, is that you could be held liable if you knew or should have known. Ignorance is not an excuse. You're a supervisor. You're supposed to monitor people that you should have known that the person had a problem and you didn't take appropriate action. And an example of it, and I've been involved in a number of court cases, was called negligent entrustment. Okay, this employee has a problem and you say, hey, take the company car and go pick up some supplies or something. That's called entrusting an inherently dangerous piece of machinery, a vehicle, to somebody that you knew or should have known. And it really comes from what's called respondeat superior, that is a long-lasting legal principle that the employer is responsible for what your employees do. You're held responsible. And if a mistake was made, the employer may be negligent. This is really the stick kind of approach. Better to take action because it's the right thing to do, but there are some consequences, much less the emotional and the guilt consequences and so forth.
And what's another word for employer? Babysitter. Supervisor.
Yeah,
Same
Some
thing.
people
Okay.
would say
Yeah.
that.
Court decisions place the responsibility on the employer. Courts support testing based on the standard of reasonable suspicion. The reasonable suspicion standard.
Basically for all workplaces. I don't know of a workplace where they said, well, they've always said if you have cause, if you can say, this person, we can get this person because we've seen these things, and generally there's going to be a combination of what? Workplace indicators combined with some signs and symptoms, such as we talked about nystagmus, odors, for instance, not just good odors, bad odors, but odors of substances, marijuana, of alcohol, that kind of thing. Generally a combination of those that you've documented and articulated that courts support testing of that.
We talked about the categories of drugs, and there's 7 categories. And I used an acronym to remember what they are, and the acronym I used is PINCH. 3 C's. And the first one is PCP, or phencyclidine. Second one is inhalants. Then narcotic analgesic, which are your painkillers. The 3 C's I did alphabetically: cannabis, which is the technical name for marijuana. Central nervous system depressants. Central nervous system stimulants. And hallucinogens.
And even though he said 7 and shows 7 categories, it says 8 here because alcohol is broken out because in a lot of ways it has some unique effects. You have levels in the law that have it here. It's easily measured, but alcohol is what kind of a drug? Upper or downer? It's a downer. It's a central nervous system depressant.
And it's
so
the number
that's
one drug problem in the country.
Would belong to.
Okay.
Okay, so when we talked about understandable framework of all the drugs of abuse will fall into these categories. All of the drugs of abuse. Okay, let's taking action. I'll introduce you to just a basic 3-step process. And it's a circular process because doing one of them might lead you back to do the other one again. Document. These days in our society, if something's written down, what? May as well not have happened. You've got to document. Think of kinds of documentation you already have. If you're a supervisor in the workplace, you have documentation on, do they come to work? Tardiness, how much sick time has been used, how many maybe complaints might have been against them. Lots of things that, in fact, I really do believe, in order to identify the good employee, do you need documentation? Absolutely, you do. You need the same for the good employee, as the so-called bad employee, the problem employee. So you need to document. What else should you document? If you have an employee that comes into work, their eyes are bloodshot, their eyes are water, you smell an alcohol, and you and another supervisor talk, and their eyes are bouncing, should that be documented? Absolutely. And do we always document? No, we don't. Oh, maybe, I'm just imagining it. Maybe it'll go away, that kind of thing. And I've had even supervisors even transfer for fear of confronting. So you document. Investigating means, okay, I've seen these kinds of things. We got to do something. And the best time to do something is early. You start to see, wait a minute, now they used to be a good employee. Used to always be on time. Why am I seeing a deterioration now? There's been a change in this person. That's the time to investigate before they come into work and the critical incident. Investigation could be sitting down and talking to them, setting standards. You know, there's been a deterioration there. A lot of your work is getting sent back. You know, I don't know if there's a problem or whatever. You're happy in your job. You're talking to the person, and you're aware of, when you're talking to them, you're aware of things. You're aware. Is there any odors there? Any things in the eyes? And you might even have to do what Tom and I did earlier, is maybe have another supervisor there. You know, I sort of suspect something. Maybe it's just me. Will you talk to the person at the same time with me? So that's part of the investigation. Then control really means, and it's the hardest thing to do, is to actually say something to the person, to confront. And it's the hardest thing to do. I mean, I could give you many, many examples. The things that you basically want to do is that you want to have a plan. Okay, where are you going to confront this person? So you want it in another environment where there's somebody else there with you. You want it in sort of a soothing environment. Remember that what you say and how you say it are critical to the outcome. What you say and how. Do people always hear what you say? No. And I've been a supervisor, and I remember, you know, I thought it was just a discussion, pointing out a different way of doing things to an employee of mine. And years later, as an officer, talked about the time I chewed him out. Chewed him out. I mean, I thought it was just a discussion. You know, you might want to think about doing something this way. He heard something very, very differently than what I say. But how somebody says something. If an employee is angry, what are you calling me for? Why are you always picking on me? And you start, well, this is why I'm always picking on you. And you raise your voice, and he raises his voice. What generally happens? Do things get better? Nope, things get worse. But by controlling, by speaking softly, speaking slowly. We've learned it in law enforcement. They've learned it in hospitals and emergency rooms, talking down somebody that's on a drug high. Is that there's like, for lack of a better, there's a natural gravity between voices. One person cannot continue screaming while the other person is talking softer and softer and lower. Hopefully that's the person in control. And you see, they bring them down. They can actually bring the person down. control. That's what that deals with. What if you've decided you're going to get somebody tested for drugs? And they say, you know, I'm glad that you called me in. I think it's a good idea. Tomorrow would be a good time to get tested for drugs. That's giving up control of the situation. What if somebody says, I don't care what you say, I'm not going to get tested for drugs. In fact, I'm leaving right now. What might you say to them? Could you tackle them? I mean, in your military situation, you might, okay, MPs, come on in here, take them off. You might be able to do that, maybe in a law enforcement situation. But what might you say to the person?
You're worth getting well.
You're worth getting well?
well, yeah.
That's a really nice way.
like that,
That's
yeah.
really a nice way to. That's a nice way to say that. I've never thought of that way to say it. You're nice, but I don't care. You know, I'm out of here right now.
I'm leaving.
What might you say? Well, you know, one of the things you might say is that first of all, you've already told them that look at. You know, we're going to get you tested. We've got this all set up here, and you know, part of your being an employee here that you've got to go along with this. Because if you don't, here's what may happen to you. Subject to what? Discipline up to and including termination.
That's if you have a policy.
Correct.
You want to have a policy, and very, very specific, I think, policy.
Correct. But what if the person says, I'm going to get into my car. You think that they're impaired by drugs or alcohol, and you know that they're going to get into their car. Who might you want to call? Who might you want to tell them you're going to call?
Yeah,
Exactly.
local, I'm going to call local.
Might you want to say, you know, I hear what you're saying, but if I think you're impaired now and you try to leave here, I'm going to first notify security, plan security, and I will call 911. Are you going to have me arrested? What should you say to that? I'm calling 911. Does that mean that they are going to be arrested? No. What do you want the person to start doing? Wait a minute. You know, this is getting serious now. I might lose my job, and now I might be arrested. You know, yeah, maybe this is not a bad alternative.
Giving them limited options.
That's right.
Let them make the decision. You're not standing and saying, you're going with me, you know what our policy is. Hey, this is the way it is. You do it this way or you do it that way.
And I've
It's
seen
your choice. You throw it right back at them.
Right. There are limited. Getting tested next month, and I've seen. Please don't put this in my package. This is good. I got some problems. You know, just don't. This will really hurt me. I'm trying to get another job. Don't put it in writing. Well, if you don't put it in writing, what have you done? Well, you've enabled. But what have you done to the next employee down the road? Why are you singling me out? The other guy had the problem, and you didn't do anything with them. It's called what? Accepted past practice. You dig yourself into a hole, as well as allowing the employee to prolong
Control.
it. And that leads right to this.
Well, we got a question, too. Did you have questions? Go ahead. No, come on. Ask it.
No, I was just going to say too. You know, you catch the person at a weeknight, like say, you know, after their binge, you know, you might want to confront them because they're the most vulnerable.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, you know, there's. It's almost like if a police officer's stopping somebody and investigate for DO, how many violations do you need? I mean, you get to the point, you know, that you've got to do something. I think there's a real danger in saying, well, I need more. I want more. I want more. I want more. I'm going to wait for the right time. If you have an employee that you believe at that point is under, you've got to take action at that point in time. Yes, you try to control it. You try to do it. Who should you never confront an employee in front of? Two sets of people. Who? Other employee. Will they turn against you, even though that they will say, you know, it's about time you did something with this guy because we still got to do the work. But if you humiliate them and do it in front of an employee, they will turn on you. It is absolutely amazing. And another corollary to that is you don't do it in front of who else? The public, the customers, that kind of thing.
If you do it in front of other employees, they're not going to have anything to do with you. You're going to turn them off.
Do you think they've already figured it out? I would say almost always that they have figured it out. You know, they know, you know, hey, what happened to him? Oh, you know, the supervisor came in and they talk about, oh, he's probably going to get drug tested. They've already figured the thing out almost always. But it really is important for every reason to treat somebody with dignity, respect. You don't humiliate them. You don't give them unlimited options. But you have them go along with the program. And, in fact, if they are under the influence, they do have a drug problem, they might get help. And sometimes people come back to the workplace as even more loyal employees.
In law enforcement, you cannot profile. Can you profile in the workplace? Yes, you can. Yes. You can check their sick leave, Mondays, Fridays, after payday, those types of things. You can profile
Exactly.
the issues, yeah. So
And think if we
actually-
talk about 4 holidays, after holiday, even, do the micro approach to that. Before lunch, after lunch. They're supposed to be at a meeting. They don't come back from a meeting. They're supposed to be at the workplace. Where are they now? Oh, they had to go somewhere.
I gotta run out to my car for a minute. What for? My pen. Here, use my pen. No, it's my favorite pen. I want to go get it. Okay. Enabling perpetuates abuse and shifts preponderance of liability onto you, the supervisor, or whatever capacity you're in. Okay. And support from administration, adherence to procedures. Okay, it proves effective in problem resolution. And if you got somebody doing drugs or other issues, okay, and again, talk to them. It's part of your job as a supervisor.
One last little anecdote I wanted to share with you, and it was a conference I attended a few years ago in Washington, D.C. It was a conference about drugs, and there was sort of basically anti-law enforcement sentiment to this conference. Is that these are public health problems, let's treat it like that, they're diseases, that kind of thing. And at one point in the conference, the researchers talked about a study, and they looked at the efficacy of treatment. They looked at 2 groups of people that got into treatment. Those people that voluntarily went into treatment, and those people that were what? Forced into treatment, very frequently by law enforcement, by the courts, by their employer. And they said, well, who would have a better outcome in treatment? Well, the general feeling is that you don't get help until you what? Until you want to. Well, guess what they found? It didn't matter. Why somebody got into treatment wasn't the issue. The if they got into treatment. By providing consequences, by forcing people to be responsible, people actually do get better. And I think of one situation that a coworker that I worked with back in Michigan, or out in Michigan, is that this employer, everybody knew he had an alcohol problem. Let's get him through work. Let's get him till retirement. Well, how long did he last in retirement? 3 months. Yeah. Died in a drunken stupor. We really did him, a big favor. He got his pension, all 3 months of it, that kind of thing. And we enabled him.
We want to thank you for showing up today, and this is the accelerated program. And for further information, I'm going to invite Brian up here from the Small Business Development Center to
ones that are responsible for this training here today.
Yes.
Thank you. For more information, please call or visit your local Small Business Development Center. You can call toll-free at 1-800-732-7232. We can give you the number of the local SBDC in your area, as well as you can call our website, dial up our website at www.nyssbdc.org for a list of centers, as well as other organizations that can provide information and assistance to you on this topic, as well as many others. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions, concerns, some drug that you've heard of, you don't know what it is?
One of the things, too, that we talked about, the eyes. Okay, would you have a problem noticing something like this on an employee? Pinpoint pupils? Yeah. Okay, got them backwards. Okay.
Jeez, yeah, that's
Okay.
interesting.
I mean, it's that simple. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We do have some.